Before we begin, let me inform you that you can find the first 7 games of the King's Quest series for an excellent price at kinguin.net in digital one-time download form. These are the updated VGA versions of the game and Super VGA where applicable with full voice support. Head over now to kinguin.net, you can find the link in the description of this video, and take advantage of this amazing offer to get King's Quest 1-7 for your PC. We continue our series of retrospectives of iconic adventure game franchises. You can already find a similar full history video about Quest for Glory, Space Quest, along with a 2-hour documentary on the history of the genre with the rise and fall of the adventure games. If you like the content of my channel, please consider supporting it by subscribing and turning on the notifications. King's Quest is a graphic adventure game series released between 1980 and 2016 and created by Sierra Entertainment. It is widely considered a classic series from the golden era of adventure games. Following the success of its first installments, the series was primarily responsible for building the reputation of Sierra. Roberta Williams, co-founder and former co-owner of Sierra, designed all of the King's Quest games until the series reboot in 2015. The King's Quest series chronicles the saga of the royal family of the Kingdom of Daventry through their various trials and adventures. The story takes place over 2 generations and across many lands as the heroes and heroines fight villains such as evil witches and wizards. The world of King's Quest encompasses many different kingdoms and supernatural realms. The main characters in the series are King Graham, originally a knight of Daventry who won the throne of the kingdom through questing, and members of his family, his wife Queen Valanice and his twin son and daughter Prince Alexander and Princess Rosella. The later sequels have more elaborate storylines, more complicated puzzles, and more original and well-developed characters. Technologically, the series pioneered the use of animation and pseudo 3D environments in graphic adventure games so that the main character could, for example, walk behind objects on screen. The primary way in which characters solve puzzles and advance through the game is by using items found earlier in the game and stored in their inventory. Other puzzles include the mapping of labyrinths, deserts, or other inhospitable locations, solving riddles, and tasks involving the use of logic or lateral thinking skills. It is important to use all of one's character senses to gather all the information available: look, listen, smell, taste, or touch whenever possible. According to Sierra Online, combined sales of the King's Quest series surpassed 3.8 million units. Before we deep dive on every entry of the King's Quest series, let's have a quick look at the actual game that inspired it. The concept of the King's Quest series was derived from ideas first established in Wizard and the Princess: Adventure in Serenia, which was an early forerunner of the game. Wizard and the Princess is a graphic adventure game written for the Apple II and published in 1980 by Online Systems. It was the second title released in the high-res adventure series after Mystery House. While Mystery House used monochrome drawings, Wizard and the Princess added color. Ports for the Atari 8-bit family and Commodore 64 were released in 1982 and 1984 respectively. The 1982 self-booting version for IBM PC compatibles was renamed Adventure in Serenia. The game takes place in the land of Serenia, where King George's daughter, Princess Priscilla, has been kidnapped by an evil wizard. The wizard Harlin has held her inside his castle far in the mountains. The king has offered half of his kingdom to anyone brave enough to travel to the wizard's castle, defeat him, and return his daughter. The player assumes the role of a happy wanderer who answers the challenge. The introduction for Adventure of Serenia explains that the adventurer, with the help of a computer, has magically transported to Serenia to save the princess. The story was based on the many fairy tales Roberta Williams used to read as a child. The game improved upon Mystery House by adding color graphics. It was the first adventure game to have full color graphics, selling over 60,000 copies. The Apple II could only display 6 different colors simultaneously, but clever use of dithering made it possible to give the illusion of more colors on screen. As with their previous game, Wizard and the Princess was distributed by Roberta and Ken Williams Company online system in plastic bags with a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk and instruction sheet. The instruction sheet has the title listed as The Wizard and the Princess. According to Sierra's Interaction magazine, the game can be considered a prelude to the King's Quest series. King's Quest is an adventure game developed by Sierra Online and published originally for the IBM PC Junior in 1984 and later for several other systems between 1984 and 1989. The game was originally titled simply as King's Quest. The subtitle Quest for the Crown was added to the game box in the 1987 re-release but did not appear in the game itself. Designed by Roberta Williams, the game was revolutionary and highly influential in the evolution of graphic adventure game genre by introducing more detailed graphics and animation. In the original version for the IBM PC Junior, the story was simple. The Kingdom of Daventry is suffering from recent disasters and hardship. King Edward calls his bravest knight, Sir Graham, to his throne and tells him he has heard of 3 legendary treasures hidden throughout the land that would end Daventry's troubles. If Graham succeeds, he will become king. Since the game's 4th release in 1984, the backstory was greatly expanded. The Kingdom of Daventry is in serious trouble after its precious magical items have been stolen. One day, King Edward the Benevolent rescued a beautiful young Princess Dahlia of Cumberland, but on the night of their wedding she was discovered to be really an evil witch who stole the king's treasure. Knowing that he had to save the kingdom, the dying King Edward sends his bravest knight, Sir Graham, to Cumberland. His quest is to rid the land of the treacherous witch, outwit the other assorted villains, and retrieve the 3 lost treasures. Because he had no heir, if Graham should succeed, he would become the next king. In 1982, IBM contacted Sierra Online for launch titles for its forthcoming PC Junior home computer announced in November of 1983. Among the software Sierra developed was King's Quest, the first animated adventure game. To create the interactive animation, the King's Quest development process deployed a prototype version of what would eventually become the Adventure Game Interpreter or AGI game engine. This prototype engine was developed by Arthur Abraham, who was let go from the King's Quest project in the middle of development. In addition to the designer and writer Roberta Williams, 6 full-time programmers worked for 18 months to complete the game. The game was re-released for DOS in 1986 using Sierra's updated AGI version 2 engine. It was also ported to the Amiga and Atari ST computers at the same time and eventually to the Sega Master System. There is also a 1990 remake of King's Quest. This release is the enhanced version of King's Quest. It uses the Sierra Creative Interpreter SCI engine, the same engine used in titles such as King's Quest IV, while it still used 16-color graphics and featured twice the resolution as well as music card support instead of the PC speaker. The 1990 enhanced version was described by critics and fans alike at the time as destroying a classic. The remake was a critical failure and prevented the release of further remakes in the series. King's Quest II: Romancing the Throne is the second installment in the King's Quest series of graphic adventure games by Sierra Online. It uses the same AGI game engine as King's Quest I: Quest for the Crown and features King Graham as the player character. It was released in 1985 for the PC, Apple II and Atari ST. Having killed the evil Dahlia and retrieved the 3 stolen treasures of Daventry, Sir Graham became the new king of Daventry. The mirror shows him a vision about a beautiful young woman, Valanice, in captivity on the top of an ivory crystal tower. Being charmed by her, King Graham travels to the world of Colima to rescue Valanice. There, he must travel through sea, air, and even death to gain the keys that unlock the 3 doors to the enchanted island where the witch Hagatha has imprisoned Valanice. King's Quest II resembles the first King's Quest in appearance and interface. It was the first game in the series to include an introduction cutscene just past the credits. It is also the first game in the series with a linear story progression. The world actually changes as the story progresses, new characters appear in the world, areas are opened up to the player and closed off when no longer needed. Puzzles involve using items to receive new items or to get past obstacles, allowing players to progress. The game in general honors non-violent solutions, offer more points for them. Many puzzles have more than one solution, but only one optimum solution to earn maximum points. Alternate solutions will net less points or in some cases cause the player to lose points. Examples of an alternate solution are taking more violent approach to getting past an obstacle, such as killing or stealing. Some choices may lead to dead ends or death. All puzzles in the game are solved through a parser. The items in the inventory have close-up pictures giving an idea what the item looks like or in some cases offering clues about the item. In a rare few examples, an item may be manipulated in some way. Limited floppy disk space would have restricted the design, but Sierra Online had been compressing the pictures by drawing them as lines and fill colors for a while. The original version for PC-DOS and PC Junior does not support sound cards or mice as they did not exist at the time of publication. The game was first released in 1985 on a self-booting disc that supported CGA, PC Junior and Tandy graphic cards as opposed to King's Quest I, which had separate versions for all 3. Sierra included several modifications to the AGI engine for compatibility with the IBM AT and EGA cards which had been introduced since King's Quest I was released. King's Quest II Romancing the Throne received mostly positive reviews from critics and fans upon release. King's Quest III To Hire is Human is the third installment in the King's Quest series of graphic adventure games developed and released by Sierra Online in 1986. The game originally was released for the Apple II and PC-DOS and later ported to several other computer systems. It was the first game in the series not to feature King Graham as the main player character. In King's Quest III, the story moves away from Daventry and King Graham to the land of Ludor, where a boy named Gwydion is being kept by the wicked wizard Manannan. According to the introduction, for as long as he could remember, the 17-year-old Gwydion has been held captive by the wizard as his servant, cooking and cleaning for him in his home atop a large mountain in Ludor. From this vantage point and with the help of a telescope, the seemingly all-knowing wizard watches the countryside, the shoreline, and vast ocean to the east and an endless desert to the west. The game's title is a pun on the proverb, "To err is human, to forgive divine," by Alexander Pope, whose namesake may have been given to the character Gwydion once it is later revealed who he really is in the game. Most of the game's various lands and locations appear in the magic map. Once the protagonist reaches a new region, he can use the magic map to travel to a previous region. A real-time clock is displayed at the top of the screen with certain actions occurring based on the clock. King's Quest III was markedly more difficult than its two predecessors. The game was required to type in magic spells line by line from a spellbook that came with the game. The spells partially served as a form of copy protection, although the game already had disk-based protection. The protagonist's movements are controlled by the player using cursor buttons. King's Quest III was the biggest and most ambitious game Sierra had made up to that point. The series designer and writer Roberta Williams had stated, "My previous games, from Mystery House to King's Quest II, were all great, but they were essentially glorified treasure hunts, your object being to win the game by finding and collecting items. It was not possible to have bigger and more complex plots than that, thanks to the technical limitations of the time." Roberta Williams collaborated with a team consisting mainly of the same people that worked with her on the previous two games, but more people were added in the production this time. Al Lowe, who made the music in King's Quest II, became the lead programmer of King's Quest III, while his wife Margaret made the music instead. This was the game on which Al Lowe learned the ropes before moving on to his own series Leisure Suit Larry. The release of the game in 1986 was quickly met with loud protests from gamers claiming that King's Quest III was not really a King's Quest, mostly because it focused on a young slave and his attempts to escape his evil master. Players did not grasp the connection between the protagonist and King Graham of Daventry until they managed to complete the game. King's Quest III sold 250,000 copies by February of 1993. King's Quest IV: The Perils of Rosella is a graphic adventure game developed and released by Sierra Online for the MS-DOS, Amiga, Apple II, Apple IIgs, and Atari ST computers in 1988. The player takes the role of Princess Rosella, daughter of King Graham of Daventry and the twin sister of Gwydion, who must save her father and a good fairy and destroy an evil witch. Picking up immediately where King's Quest III to Aeris Human left off, as King Graham tosses his children his adventurer's cap, he suffers a massive heart attack and is left on his deathbed. The devastated Princess Rosella is contacted via the magic mirror by the good fairy Genesta in the faraway land of Tamir, who reveals the existence of a magic fruit that can heal King Graham in exchange for Rosella helping Genesta. Rosella agrees and is teleported to the fairy kingdom of Tamir. The realm's ruler, Queen Genesta, reveals that her arch-enemy, the evil fairy Lolot, has stolen her talisman, without which Genesta will die in 24 hours. Additionally, without the talisman, the fairy lacks the power to return Rosella to Daventry. Rosella agrees to undertake a quest for both the talisman and the magic fruit and goes out undercover dressed as a peasant girl. The game was simultaneously produced and published in the AGI and SCI engines. The AGI engine was used in all earlier Sierra adventure games, whereas the SCI in all later ones. SCI supported higher resolution graphics, 320 by 200 resolution versus the older 160 by 200 pixels, more sophisticated animation, mouse support, and sound card support. King's Quest IV was the first commercially released game for IBM PC compatibles to support sound cards instead of only the standard built-in speakers. The new SCI engine allowed the game's designers to incorporate an orchestrated music score along with more complex sound effects, a previously unattainable feat. To ensure an immersive soundtrack, composer William Goldstein was hired to write the game's musical score, totaling over 75 short music pieces. Roberta Williams wrote, "Before King's Quest IV was released, word leaked out that King Graham would have had a heart attack and might die. Fans were upset enough to write in asking to save Graham. I wanted King's Quest IV to have some pressure applied to you. A timed game taking place over a 24-hour period, so you roam around during the day and eventually it turns to night. I don't remember other games using the same scenes at night. It looked creepy." With a female protagonist and more colorful graphics than in her earlier games, she attempted to appeal more specifically to female demographics. As the game's aspect that satisfied her most, she said, "I like the heroine, Rosella. I guess because she's part of me that's coming out. I really identified with her. Sometimes she's delicate, but she's strong, knows what she wants, and she's not afraid to do what she has to do. She's courageous. It is fun for me to do a female character." King's Quest IV sold 100,000 copies in its first 2 weeks and totaled around 400,000 units. King's Quest V, Absence Makes the Heart Go Yonder, is a 1990 graphic adventure game by Sierra Online. Originally released in November of 1990, it featured a significant improvement in graphics achieved through the introduction of VGA into the series. It was also the first King's Quest installment to replace the typing user interface, the parser, with a point-and-click user interface. The title is a spoof on the proverb "absence makes the heart grow fonder." In the introduction to the game, a view of Castle Daventry is shown when suddenly a mysterious cloaked figure appears. He enchants the castle, causing a whirlwind to appear, which soon engulfs the castle and lifts it out of sight. Because he's out walking when this happens, King Graham is the only member of the royal family to be left behind. He returns to the castle to find that it has disappeared and is soon confronted by a talking gnoll named Cedric. Cedric witnessed the cloaked figure's attack and tells Graham that it was a powerful evil wizard named Mordak who stole the castle. Cedric then brings Graham to the land of Serenia where his master Crispin resides. Crispin is also a wizard, but a good one, who gives Graham some advice, his old wand, and a piece of white snake which allows Graham to speak with animals. Graham then starts on his journey. Though still largely standalone, King's Quest V is one of the few where the elements of the plot itself are directly connected to events or individuals in both previous and future games. The location the game is set in, Serenia, was first visited in the earlier game Wizard and the Princess. During the game, King Graham discovers the skeleton of a man in the Serenia Desert, which is identified as the body of the Wanderer, the protagonist from Wizard and the Princess, in the King's Quest companion. King's Quest V was the last in the series to feature EGA and Tandy graphics at 320 by 200 resolution. A separate EGA release contained a 16-color version of the graphics, whereas the VGA release featured a 256-color VGA graphics. The diskette version of both EGA and VGA requires Graham to cast spells throughout the game, requiring the user to refer to the manual as a form of copy protection. This was omitted in the CD-ROM version. Released in 1992, the CD-ROM version also added voice acting. There are also many script differences between the floppy and CD-ROM versions. Many of the narrative descriptions were modified and lines were added to characters that did not have speaking roles. For example, the snake and some of the villagers are given a few quotes, whereas they did not speak at all and ignore Graham in the floppy version. In order to make the Nintendo Entertainment System adaptation more family-friendly and release it to stores everywhere, Nintendo of America had to follow its video game content guidelines, requiring to tone down violence, nudity, language, and religious themes in the games. For example, in the NES version, Queen Isabella orders the wolves to take Graham and Cedric to the dungeons forever instead of actually killing them as in the original. The game cost a total budget of around $1 million. Sierra used similar animation techniques that Disney had applied for The Little Mermaid by rotoscoping live actors for the framework of the character sprites and the animation frames. The background scenes were hand-drawn, painted, and scanned. King's Quest V sales ultimately surpassed 500,000 copies. King's Quest VI, Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, is a point-and-click adventure game first released in 1992 as the 6th installment in the King's Quest series produced by Sierra Online. Written by Roberta Williams and Jane Jensen, King's Quest VI is widely recognized as the high point in the series for its landmark 3D introduction movie and professional voice acting. Hollywood actor Robbie Benson provided the voice for Prince Alexander, the game's protagonist. The name of this sequel is a pun on the common phrase "here today, gone tomorrow." This pun is related to the abrupt departure of Prince Alexander after the events of King's Quest V, where he was just rescued by King Graham along with Princess Cassima, who asked Alexander to come visit her at the end of that game. The game takes place almost entirely in a fictional kingdom called the Land of the Green Isles. The kingdom comprises several islands and is described as being largely isolated from the outside world. The player can travel between different islands after obtaining a magic map. The center of the kingdom is the Isle of the Crown, which has an Arabian Nights theme. The Isle of Wonder is inspired by Alice in Wonderland, and the Isle of the Sacred Mountain is inspired by classical mythology. The Isle of the Beast, inspired by Beauty and the Beast, is heavily forested and scattered with magical barriers. There are also additional hidden areas. One of these is inhabited by a tribe of druids, while another gives the player the option to confront death. A significant aspect of the story and gameplay is the option for the player to receive different endings based on choices made during the course of the game. Partway through the game, the player has the option to pursue either the short path or the long path with more puzzles and a more satisfying ending. Upon completing either path, the player is given a clue about what choices would have led to the other ending. Endings contain many minor variables based on optional tasks. Almost half of the game's quests are optional, many have multiple solutions, and the open world design allows players to choose the order. King's Quest VI is a 2D graphic adventure with a point-and-click interface. The player is given an icon-based toolbar at the top of the screen of selectable actions: walk, look, that provides a description from the narrator of the object targeted, action, and talk respectively. It also includes the item inventory and a game options menu. This is the second game in the series to feature this interface, which was introduced in its immediate predecessor King's Quest V as a new feature of the SCI-1 version of Sierra's Creative Interpreter engine. Previous titles in the series featured a text parser where players had to type commands and actions instead of selecting them on the screen. Gameplay involves solving puzzles. Solving the puzzles in the game usually requires traveling between the islands that make up the game world, which is accomplished by means of a magic map. Although a magic map had been used in earlier games of the series, such as King's Quest III, its implementation in King's Quest VI was different from earlier games in that it was only used for travel between islands which could not be reached using the walking interface. King's Quest creator and designer Roberta Williams first met with Sierra newcomer and co-designer Jane Jensen, who would go on to create the Gabriel Knight series in May of 1991 to discuss the design of the upcoming sixth title in the series. Two key goals of the writers were to keep the game's tone consistent with its predecessors while still making it distinct in its own, and to make also the players connect emotionally with the game. Emmy-winning director Stuart M. Rosen directed the voice cast of King's Quest VI for the CD-ROM version, which included, as already mentioned, actor Robbie Benson. Williams estimated the budget to have been about $700,000 and stated that the crew included more than 20 people working for 14 months. King's Quest VI was initially scheduled for release in September of 1992, then delayed until mid-October. According to Ken Williams, about 400,000 copies of King's Quest VI were sold in the first week of release and is considered one of the best-selling adventure games of all time. King's Quest VII: The Princeless Bride is a graphic adventure game developed and published by Sierra Online for the MS-DOS, Microsoft Windows, and Macintosh computers in 1994. It features high-resolution graphics in a style reminiscent of Disney animated films and is the only King's Quest game with multiple protagonists, Queen Valanice and Princess Rosella. The name of this entry, The Princeless Bride, is a pun on the title of The Princess Bride. Like most King's Quest titles, it is also a reference to the plot. Princess Rosella is soon to be a bride, but ends up in another world shortly before her marriage. It is the only entry in the series to feature Queen Valanice as a major role, and also the only one in which King Graham is not shown or mentioned at all. Sierra marketed the game as an improvement in the series by stating that completion of earlier King's Quest adventures was not necessary to fully enjoy the game, even though the final chapter reveals a strong connection in the events of King's Quest IV. King's Quest VII is different from the previous King's Quest games in terms of structure. The action is separated into 6 chapters, each set primarily in a different region of the realm of Eldritch. The player alternates between 2 heroines, Valanice and Rosella, with each chapter. The 2 heroines travel through some of the same places during the course of the game, finally meeting up again in the end. Aside from the multi-chapter layout, the most significant change in game structure is the simplification of user interface by the use of a smart pointer. When playing the game, the pointer lights up when passed over an object that can be used. Players can get or use objects and talk to characters by directly clicking on them, whereas previous games required the player to select an action icon and then click on the environment, and can click on the environment without indicating which parts of the game could be interacted with. One of the game's highlights is its graphics. King's Quest VII has very elaborate and colorful graphics compared to other games of the time, with painted backgrounds and animation techniques. The game makes use of Super VGA graphics new at the time, before the Dig and Space Quest VI. Also included are certain areas that pan from one side to the other rather than going from screen to screen. Despite the cartoonish graphics characteristic of family-friendly computer games, the game includes several violent death scenes. The game offers 2 different endings. The developers aimed for the effect of traditional animation works by Walt Disney Pictures. As such, the full game contains more than 5 times the animation of any other Sierra game of the time. The game's backgrounds are hand-drawn and scanned. The game sprites were pencil drawn on paper and also scanned and then edited and colored digitally, not unlike the traditional animation process in animated feature films of the era. Of the 70 characters that appear in the game, some are more realistic and human-like, like the protagonists, and others more cartoony. The final game was much shortened from an earlier concept in order to fit the game on a single CD-ROM. Upon release, the game was praised for its stunning graphics and superb gameplay, but there were some critics and fans of the series that disliked the use of Disney-style cartoon graphics. King's Quest sales in the United States alone surpassed 300,000 units. King's Quest: Mask of Eternity is a hybrid point-and-click adventure and action-adventure developed and published by Sierra Studios in 1998. It was the 8th official game in the King's Quest series, the first and only game in the main series where the main character is neither King Graham nor a member of his family, as well as the first in the series to use a full 3D engine as opposed to 2D cartoon or pixel style of the earlier games. The story begins in Castle Daventry with King Graham and his minister talking about the everyday affairs of running the country, when the magic mirror activates in front of them, showing them a bad omen. They witness Lucreto, the archangel of the realm of the sun, destroy the mask of eternity and releasing a wave of energy. The mirror goes on to show the kingdom's only hope, the lowly peasant and knight Connor of Daventry from a nearby village. He is shown chatting with his neighbor Sarah when a storm arises and a piece of the mask falls at his feet. He picks it up and turns around to find Sarah, who had been turned to stone. The game revolves around this young knight as he attempts to save King Graham, Queen Valanice and the Kingdom of Daventry from harm. The game combines a point-and-click single multi-purpose context-sensitive cursor from King's Quest VII and a variation of the standard adventure game item inventory along the top. It also includes information about total mask pieces collected and total gold coins. A menu along the bottom of the screen includes information concerning level, character experience, items, potions offering different abilities, the two current weapons and armor. On the right side of the menu is the interface for the grappling hook, item and rocks. The cursor is dynamic and can change into 4 different types depending on actions. The game was designed primarily to be played in third-person mode, but also offers a first-person mode. The cursor is dynamic and can change into 4 different types depending on actions. The game was designed primarily to be played in third-person mode, but also offers a first-person mode that allows the player to have a better look around or get close-ups of items. There are 3 difficulty levels for combat: easy, normal and hard. Mask of Eternity went through 2 or 3 main development phases in which Roberta Williams' ideas changed, the engine was finalized and the graphics were finalized. Roberta Williams classified Mask of Eternity as either adventure or within a possible new genre, a 3D adventure. As a 3D adventure, it retained a point-and-click puzzle system of traditional adventure games, but also included action-adventure elements such as avoiding traps and rolling boulders. Williams wanted to break away from the drawn-out animations and lengthy cutscenes typical of adventure games, which led to the player spending a great deal of their time sitting and watching. The game includes many actions and puzzles that could only be done in 3D, many based on physics, rock tossing, jumping, climbing, or 3D combat. 3D also allowed the team to expand on and focus on the exploration element, which was one of the main highlights of previous King's Quest games. Roberta Williams claimed in 1999 that Mask of Eternity was among the best-selling adventures of 1998 and outsold Grim Fandango 2-1. The estimated total sales of the game surpassed 750,000 units. There have been several attempts to create a 9th installment in the King's Quest series, all of which have been cancelled before going into production. All 3 development attempts never went past announcement or concept stages, nor received official titles. Following the release of King's Quest Mask of Eternity, Roberta Williams occasionally alluded to ideas if she was allowed to make the follow-up game, or ideas that would influence the direction of the follow-up games, or ideas that were cut during the process of King's Quest VIII that she would have liked to have introduced in the following game. In addition, she had ideas to add multiplayer as early as King's Quest VIII early development, but these were cut and she hoped to introduce them in future games of the series. There was a 9th installment in development by Vivendi Games, who had acquired Sierra between 2001 and 2002. It was cancelled before going into production. The game never made it past the prototype stage. Telltale Games' take on the 9th installment of the King's Quest franchise was first announced at a press event on February of 2011. Telltale said that they had entered into an agreement with Activision, the current owner of the rights to the classic Sierra Online adventure franchises, to create new episodic games based on those series. The first Sierra intellectual property they intended to work on was King's Quest. As development never went far, the game never received a title beyond the reference to the franchise name. There was also King's Quest, an episodic video game series developed by The Odd Gentleman and published by Activision under the Sierra Entertainment brand name for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation and Xbox. It is a new reimagining of the long-running King's Quest series. While it is an adventure game like the previous games in the series, the interface is not fully point-and-click. The PC version only uses point-and-click for the dialogue and first-person scenes. The game is one of several attempts at resurrecting or rebooting the King's Quest franchise since 1998. The new chapters are seen as neither a remake nor necessarily a sequel, but as a reimagining. The original games are considered to be part of the canon of the new series, as each chapter will take place between those games, but previous games may be reinterpreted in completely new ways. That was the complete history of the King's Quest series of adventure games, a franchise that helped shape the genre and had a major contribution in establishing Sierra as among the leaders in the industry. Do not forget to watch the other videos in the series along with a 2-hour documentary on the rise and fall of the adventure games. If you like my content, please do not forget to support the channel by subscribing and pressing the like button. Thank you all for watching.